Tonight, the tip of the iceberg.
Not very many in the United States.
The coronavirus now in 13 U.S. states with the global death toll rising. And
I'm very much alive.
Biden's big win in South Carolina has some Democrats bowing out.
I will no longer seek to be the 2020 Democratic nominee for president.
And the third time's a charm.
It's a proud day.
Israeli voters head to the polls.
I respect any decision of any voter.
Plus,
the Taliban maybe are more serious than I'm giving them credit for.
A peace deal with the Taliban as American troops prepare to exit Afghanistan. And
it's because it was never there in the first place.
A Supreme Court case could shake up abortion laws. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. The effort to contain the coronavirus amid the rising death toll. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Jenna Browder.
And I'm John Jessup. The coronavirus has claimed yet another life here in the United States, the sixth person to die from the disease, according to the Associated Press, even as the global death toll rises to 3,000.
Now, this is the White House urges Americans to stay away from certain areas like South Korea and northern Italy. CBN White House correspondent Ben Kennedy joins us from the North Lawn with more on how the president is handling this. Ben?
Well, Jenna, John, right now there are at least 9 suspected or confirmed cases of local transmission right here in the U.S. And today the White House maintains the risk to Americans does remain low, adding that they know more cases will travel, but the task force is on top of containing the virus.
The vaccine, how are they doing?
President Trump met with pharmaceutical executives Monday to discuss the timeline for a coronavirus vaccine.
We've asked them to accelerate whatever they're doing in terms of a vaccine.
The outbreak has crossed the country with new cases popping up in Florida, New York, and Rhode Island. Trump's North Carolina rally is still on track.
These were set up a long time ago, and others are. I mean, you could ask that to the Democrats because they're having a lot of rallies. They're all having rallies. That's what they're doing. They're campaigning.
But do you think it's safe? Are you worried at all?
I think it's very safe.
The White House has banned foreign nationals who visited Iran in the last 14 days and raised the travel advisory for Italy and South Korea to level 4. Delta and American are suspending flights between JFK and Milan. Meanwhile, there is also talk of restricting travel across the Mexican border. Trump tweeted, "I was criticized by Democrats when I closed the country down to China many weeks ahead of what almost everyone recommended. Saved many lives."
I want to tell everybody that the risk to Americans is still very low, and that is because of the unprecedented, aggressive, and early steps that the president took.
One such step, appointing Vice President Mike Pence to lead the coronavirus task force. He was seen praying for the country's leaders as they work to combat the outbreak.
This is a unique virus with unique features. This virus is not influenza. We are in uncharted territory.
The president has ordered the State Department to help step up screenings as the military stands ready to be deployed.
The Department of Defense, under the Secretary's direction, has standing plans to respond to infectious disease outbreaks, and we're executing those plans at our bases and operating locations around the world.
Last week, the Dow was down triple digits amid virus fears, but appears to be back in the green a bit.
As of now, I've seen no indication that the panic surrounding this virus, or the coronavirus itself, I've seen no indication that that is actually threatening liquidity within our systems.
Now, the Dow did end up tonight, so a bit of good news on Wall Street to share. We are still waiting on the details of the new cases, but the 2 people who did die in Seattle were in their 50s and 70s, both with underlying health issues. A state of emergency has since been declared in Washington state. John, Jenna?
All right, Ben Kennedy at the White House. To election 2020 tonight, another top contender for the White House bows out. Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar announcing the end of her presidential campaign.
Klobuchar now saying she'll endorse Joe Biden. The former vice president getting quite a boost after South Carolina's primary this weekend. Now, though, all eyes turn to Super Tuesday and the 14 states up for grabs.
Abigail Robertson has a look at the state of the Democratic race.
Voters here in North Carolina, neighboring Virginia, California, and other states are preparing to head to the polls tomorrow. Joe Biden is bringing much-needed momentum to Super Tuesday after delivering his first win in South Carolina.
This campaign is taking off, so join us.
Raising more than $5 million after his Saturday win, Biden's supporters see more good things to come.
I think it's just the momentum. I think it really shows the country that we're on a path to success.
Touting his electability.
He's the only candidate that can beat Donald Trump.
Heading into South Carolina, billionaire Tom Steyer told CBN News he was optimistic.
I'm feeling great.
But after a third-place finish where he put his major efforts, Steyer called it quits, as did Mayor Pete Buttigieg, who was in third place in the national delegate count behind Bernie Sanders and Biden, but couldn't see a clear path to victory.
I will no longer seek to be the 2020 Democratic nominee for president, but I will do everything in my power to ensure that we have a new Democratic president come January.
As the field narrows, Steyer and Buttigieg's exits could be troubling for Bernie Sanders.
I'm just not confident, number one, that he can beat Donald Trump, just flat out, and he didn't resonate with me.
Many of their former supporters tell CBN News they're wary of his plans like Medicare for All.
Don't throw us in a system if we don't want it.
The Biden campaign stands ready to expand their base.
And we are very much alive.
But for the most part, willing to back the eventual nominee.
We're all going to come together as Democrats and support the ticket.
More than a third of all the total delegates up for grabs will be awarded on Super Tuesday. For candidates who don't win a sizable portion of those delegates, this could be the end of the line. Reporting from Charlotte, North Carolina, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
Thank you, Abigail. Well, Bernie Sanders boycotting Washington's biggest pro-Israel conference of the year, and he's getting some flack for it. Today at APEC, Vice President Pence blasted Sanders, warning he would be the most anti-Israel president in history. In stark contrast, Pence praised President Trump for his pro-Israel record, pointing to the killing of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani.
All deserve to know that every one of the leading Democrats running for president criticized President Trump's decision to take out Soleimani. Bernie Sanders even called the president's decision to take out Soleimani, in his words, quote, assassinating a government official. Well, I've got news for Bernie Sanders. Soleimani was not some government official. He was a terrorist, and President Trump was right to take him down.
And here now for our Faith Nation political panel, Scott Thuman, Chief Political Correspondent with Sinclair Broadcast Group, and David Brody, CBN's Chief Political Analyst. Scott, we'll go to you first. Boycotting APEC may appeal to Sanders' progressive base, but does it potentially hurt him in a wider general election base?
Well, sure. I mean, look, any time that there is a significant and rather powerful population of electorate that feels that you're not respecting what they care about, you run that risk. And it's a tightrope. I mean, it really is walking with some of these groups. If he's going to not show up, that's one thing, but to call it in some light racist, that's where you can start to bother, not just bother, but offend. And you can lose votes that way. And that's where, if you're the candidates, I mean, you had video appearances that were scheduled by, for example, Pete Buttigieg, who is no longer in it, Amy Klobuchar doing via video. It gives you some distance so you can still take part, but maybe you aren't giving a full-throated endorsement of everything that APEC stands for. But sure, there is some liability in not showing up.
David, Sanders, of course, is Jewish, but he's often labeled as someone who's anti-Israel. For a lot of people at home, this just doesn't make sense. Kind of explain that.
Right. Well, look, I grew up Jewish, so I'm speaking from experience. I'm surrounded by a bunch of liberal Jews. And look, and I say that with endearment in my heart, because they believe that politics really, to a degree, is even more important than Israel. And I know that because I've lived it and I see it every day. So in other words, when Bernie Sanders speaks about, you know, he's called anti-Israel, look, most American Jews say, look, we're not necessarily against you on this. I mean, they've got issues with Netanyahu's government, and if it was a more moderate politician in there, in terms of maybe Benny Gantz or someone else, then they would be a little bit more pro-Israel. So I don't think Bernie takes as much of a hit, for sure, from American Jews on that than he does maybe potentially in Israel.
Scott, Super Tuesday is tomorrow. We were talking before this segment that you had a interview scheduled with Pete Buttigieg that had to be canceled. Just this morning. How much of a surprise was his announcement last night that he's bowing out?
So initially, those are the ones that kind of shock everyone, and then you start to digest it a little bit, and you see that there was a reason behind it. You don't want to go into Super Tuesday and have a bad showing. And that doesn't mean he necessarily was going to. But if you don't meet, remember, that 15% threshold in states, you're not going to get delegates in a congressional district or statewide. And if you look at a state like California, where only maybe 2, possibly 3 candidates were going to reach that threshold, that means the rest walk out of there with 0 delegates. So, you know what? You've got some political equity right now. They're able to trade that to say, I'm going to endorse someone like Joe Biden. It maybe pays off down the road. Maybe you're on a ticket. Maybe you get some great position.
Save face.
You save some face. You don't have those losses. And you're still getting out in a little bit of a way on top.
I want to ask real quickly, what does the campaign look like without Buttigieg? He was one of the few who was able to really articulate faith. He had that meeting with former President Jimmy Carter yesterday. What does the campaign look like without him being one who's so vocal to share about his faith?
Well, Biden has a bigger smile on his face. I think that's part of it. And then Klobuchar got out and the smile got bigger. And when Bloomberg, if he has this big Dud Tuesday, we'll see if it's not Super Tuesday, maybe Dud Tuesday, and he potentially gets out, then he's giggling all the way potentially to the nomination. We'll see. I think, look, Biden has math on his side, right? All of these left candidates, I'm not going to call them center left. They're left candidates, but they're not socialists. So they're to the right of Bernie. And all of these candidates do Biden very, very well. Bernie's got, if not momentum, he's got for sure energy. And that's where the kind of the base of the party is.
And 2 quick things to dovetail on that, if you don't mind. One is that you asked how it looks. It looks old. I mean, there's no candidate other than Tulsi Gabbard now under the age of 70.
Trump's the youngest one at both parties now.
So that's significant. No candidate aside from Tulsi Gabbard, who we know doesn't stand much of a chance, right? So no one else. And then you look forward to what's going to happen next. And you talked about saving face. I mean, look, if you want to try and build tickets now, you can do that. But you talked about Mike Bloomberg. People said, should he try and build a ticket earlier? Maybe that's how he stands out. I saw him today. Asked him a quick question. He was on the street in downtown D.C., and I asked, how you feeling about Super Tuesday? And he said, talk to my press secretary. I said, nothing from you? He said, talk to my press secretary. It's a pretty simple question. You'd think you'd get a, hey, we're going to go get him. I think everyone's a little nervous if your name is not Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders.
Yeah. Well, great conversation. Scott Thuman, David Brody, thank you both.
Of course. Thank you.
Coming up, take 3. Could the third time be a charm? When we come back, the latest from Election Day in Israel.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep as the world watches from the outside.
It's a big diplomatic tug of war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
What starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline Friday night at 9:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Benjamin Netanyahu tonight breaking the stalemate in Israel's election. Today, more than 4 million voters cast their ballots for the third time in this past year. This breaking a 12-month tie. The Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, fighting for his political life against Blue and White Party leader Benny Gantz.
It's a proud day. This is a democracy. You have a great right that you should exercise with confidence.
Of course, I support myself, but I respect any decision of any voter. It's about time that we'll be much more united.
Joining us now from Israel is our CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell with live analysis. Chris, as Jenna just met, Netanyahu has been serving as caretaker prime minister for the last 10 to 12 months. A win tonight, what will that mean for both him and for Israel moving forward?
Well, John, right now we're here in Likud headquarters. People are quite excited about what's happening. The three main exit polls look like they're giving Netanyahu and the right-wing parties about 60 votes. The reason that's significant, if they get to 61 for the first time, maybe Netanyahu can actually form a government. Just about a few days ago, even a couple of weeks ago, a lot of people didn't think this was going to happen. It's a huge victory for Benjamin Netanyahu as he's facing possible charges of bribery, fraud, and breach of trust in just about 2 weeks. So a lot of excitement. We just talked to one of the head members of the Likud Central Committee. They're cautiously optimistic they can go from 60 perhaps to 61 to form that government.
Chris, will he have the votes to secure a majority coalition in the Knesset? And what would that mean for Netanyahu's corruption trial that's going to begin later this month?
Well, it's likely, and it looks like right now he's going to try to form a government before March 17th when that trial begins. If that happens, it's very likely that he would have immunity as serving as the prime minister. That's usually what they expect here in Israel right now. So it looks like if he does have this electoral victory right now, it could not only help him politically and historically politically, but also legally as well.
Chris, 2 hours before the polls closed, the Jerusalem Post was reporting that more than 65% of Israelis voted heading to the polls, leading to projections that this will be the highest since 1999. What does all of that suggest to you?
What it suggests is actually the strategy of Benjamin Netanyahu has worked. After the election in September, they realized there were 300,000 Likud voters, that's his political party, that didn't go to the polls. And so what they did is they had rally after rally after rally. He went to meet them face to face. He had ads urging these Likud voters to go out into the polls. They represented sort of this shift in that just 3 or 4 seats to make it possible that Netanyahu can actually form a government. It looks like that strategy has worked, and right now we're looking at the fact that perhaps for the first time in a year that Israel can actually have a government for the first time in a year. And for Netanyahu, it's historic. For the U.S.-Israel relationship, it's very significant since President Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu are such an ally. Big historic night here at Likud headquarters and Israel. We'll be updating that tomorrow on the 700 Club and the CBN News Channel.
All right, Chris Mitchell in Jerusalem, thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris. Well, the ink is barely dry, and already there appear to be major challenges to the U.S.-Taliban peace deal signed this weekend. The Taliban and the Afghan government having a tough time negotiating a path forward. The Foundation for Defense of Democracy's John Hanna says he believes the Taliban will do what it can to get American forces out of Afghanistan.
Taliban is also supposed to renounce and commit to fighting al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups in Afghanistan. I think that's a long bet as well. That will be a real indicator if, in fact, the Taliban does come out publicly and renounce their alliance with al-Qaeda, which has been decades in the making, was critical in 9/11. That could be a mark that the Taliban maybe are more serious than I'm giving them credit for.
Peace deal calls for all U.S. forces to withdraw from Afghanistan over the next 14 months.
Coming up, why pro-life leaders think this Supreme Court case could shake the legal foundations of abortion in America.
On October 1st, 1961, history was made when a tiny station began transmitting the first signals of the Christian Broadcasting Network.
CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network.
And now, a new era has begun with the all-new CBN News Channel.
Just moments ago, the Iron Dome intercepted an incoming rocket right on the Gaza border.
Administering in this area, spiritual warfare is definitely involved.
A 24/7 news network, bringing you the news you want from a source you can trust.
In Kenya, 40% of the medical services are actually provided by these Christian hospitals.
Let's talk about the economy.
Believers here are joining together to win people to Jesus Christ.
All your favorite shows now in one place. Go to CBNNewsChannel.com to find out how to get the CBN News Channel on your TV all day, every day. CBN News. Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Welcome back. The Supreme Court is getting ready to take up a case involving Obamacare once again, this time when it convenes a new term in October.
And the timing putting the issue front and center ahead of November's election. The appeal centers on the Affordable Care Act's individual mandate and comes after a federal court ruling in December. That ruling calling it unconstitutional to require all Americans to buy insurance or pay a penalty. The Supreme Court will hear the appeal and decide whether or not it agrees with the federal court.
And Jenna, on Wednesday, the Supreme Court will take up its first major abortion case since the confirmation of President Trump's 2 new justices.
Yeah, we're all watching to see what Justices Kavanaugh and Gorsuch will do. And as Paul Strand reports, pro-life activists hope they'll lean right and give the court a pro-life majority for the first time in decades.
The Louisiana case is about a state law insisting abortion doctors have admitting privileges at a local hospital for their patients. The state says it's necessary in case medical complications arise that the clinic can't handle. But abortion providers say only one Louisiana abortion doctor has such admitting privileges. So enforcing the law would drive needed doctors out of the business, and they say that would be an undue burden on women's right to an abortion.
There's an abortion business that is fighting for the right to abandon its patients. And the court is also going to be looking at the question of whether that business should be allowed to go into court and try to strike down the very laws that were enacted to protect their patients, the women.
Alan Parker of the Justice Foundation says many women he represents are asking the court to rule against the abortion providers.
We actually put in 4,660 legally admissible written testimonies of women injured by abortion. It's the largest collection in the world of direct sworn evidence about what abortion does to women.
There is a lie out there that is promoted by the abortion lobby.
Brandy Swindell says the lie is that abortion is good for women, and she fights it by running pro-life pregnancy centers.
Staffed by people and by women who have had abortions. And they're involved in pro-life work because they believed the lie and then they experienced the pain of abortion and it changed their life forever.
We know for decades women have been speaking out more and more about the harm abortion does to them for a lifetime. And it's not that abortion sometimes harms the mother, it always harms the mother.
207 Capitol Hill lawmakers want the court to use this case to review its stand that no undue burden can be placed on women getting an abortion. That could potentially lead the court to reconsider whether getting an abortion itself should be an automatic right. Pro-life activist David B. Wright says it's certainly not a constitutional right, but one made up by the justices in 1973.
And they actually even described that this right, which hadn't ever previously existed in the formation of our country and in the Constitution of the United States, but they said they found it in the penumbra, or the shadows of the Constitution. And it's because it was never there in the first place.
Foster says it's time to re-examine that so-called right.
The court can finally take a look at the precedent that got us here, looking at it and recognizing that it is the court's prerogative to assess that precedent.
The court should announce its ruling in this important case by June. Paul Strand, CBN News, the Supreme Court.
All right, thank you, Paul. Coming up, no need to adjust your screens. What you're seeing there is the real deal. When we return, we explain the phenomenon that made these homes look like a scene straight from the movies.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Watch Studio 5 Wednesday night at 9:30.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
And finally tonight, so much for an early spring.
That's right. Heavy snow and extreme wind chills brought blizzard conditions to upstate New York this weekend, creating what looked like scenes from Frozen or the Chronicles of Narnia.
Wow.
Several homes along Lake Erie were encased in ice as a result of strong winds and heavy waves. The lake effect phenomenon also buried other parts of upstate New York in several feet of snow. Jenna, can you believe those scenes?
Goodness, that looks cold. You know, it almost doesn't look real. I will say, though, it's not just upstate New York. I know in parts of Colorado and out west, they got some places up to a foot of snow. So
great to go skiing in.
Yeah.
This guy, there was a guy whose house was encased in snow. He said that he had to chisel his way out through a back door in order to get out of his house.
I believe it. Gosh, I believe it looking at that. All right, well, that is going to do it for Faith Nation tonight.
Have a great night. Hope to see you again tomorrow.